Welcome to episode 13 of It's All in Your Head podcast. I just want to do a little bit of warning for you today that what we're going to be talking about today may trigger some trauma for some of you. It's a delicate subject, and we're really happy that we have our guest today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to It's All in Your Head podcast. And we're here with Sabrina. She's got a story she'd like to share with us. So I'm going to just say, Sabrina, I'm giving you the floor.
All right. This story is about my sister. And my sister is 3 years younger than me. She's my only sibling. And the best way to describe Olivia would be that she somehow had the ability to command everyone's attention while still making everyone else feel like they were getting attention themselves. And so growing up, she was my best friend. And I think a lot of people think that when I say best friend, I mean like how everyone's their sibling's best friend, I think in a lot of cases. But this was like, she was why I was able to overcome a lot of things growing up, including depression that I didn't realize was depression when I was a kid before all this happened. But so anyhow, 2014, I graduated high school and I went to college. And over the next year, while my sister was still in high school, she had a lot of trouble making friends and that sort of thing. Not really trouble. She just wished that she had like a really tight friends group. And so come to the next summer, and she'd finally found that friends group in a youth group called Young Life. And so I wasn't going to be home for the summer, and she was trying to decide whether she wanted to go to this youth camp. So she was going to be out of the state. It was going to be her first time going to camp ever, like a sleepaway camp. And she was going to be around a lot of people she knew. But so we had a lot of conversations about, her being nervous about it, but it being a good thing because she needed something to do since I wasn't going to be home for summer, all that stuff. And I basically supported her. I said, that's a good thing. Like, you need to do this and get yourself out there. So July of 2015, she goes to the camp. And before I go too far, so Young Life is a Christian youth camp that's fairly large. It's essentially the mega church equivalent of a youth group. And Livy and I, growing up, our dad was a pastor, but we were of a really small church. Small in that we weren't a mega church. So we had grown up in our youth group, but we had never gone to a camp like this because, we were a smaller youth group. So Liv had traded youth groups to go to Young Life. And their camps are huge, like they're dedicated campgrounds for Young Life. Most of them have obstacle courses that they say are team building, and a lot of, like, I guess we'll call them rides that are meant to be team building as well.
Okay.
So Liv goes to camp. Couple days after she had been there, she didn't have her phone, so I hadn't been talking to her then. My dad called me out of the blue. What and I was cooking dinner because I specifically remember all of this very clearly. And I can't eat chicken stuffed with asparagus anymore for this very reason. My dad called me, and all he said was, "Liv's been in an accident. You need to go up to North Carolina." And at that point, I was going to FSU. I was in Tallahassee. So, Liv had told me about these rides, and instantly my first thought was something happened on one of those. So I'm freaking out, obviously, for several hours while I was getting up to North Carolina. And during that time, no one was telling me anything. So I got to North Carolina, and we passed the hospital because I thought I was going to the hospital. Like I was thinking, like, okay, worst case scenario, she's like paralyzed or, in a coma, like something like that. Best case scenario, she just broke her leg, and I knew that if she was in like a coma or, if she was paralyzed or anything, I was like, that's fine. Like, we can work through that, you know. I guess the actual worst option wasn't really hitting me at that point. So, but we drove past the hospital, and I was driving with my aunt, and I asked her, I was like, why aren't we going to the hospital? And she said, no, we're going to meet your parents at the hotel. So, we went to the hotel. My other uncle opened the door, and he didn't say anything to me. He just hugged me and was crying. And he said he loved me, and then he walked out. My parents were in the room. And basically the first thing that they said was, she didn't make it. And I think, I don't know, it kind of felt like the entire like floor of earth just like left me. So basically what had happened was the Carolina Point, where this camp is, has a ride that they had specifically designed for their camp because basically it's one of those giant, they're at a lot of carnivals, and there's one at Six Flags if you've ever been there, but they have, basically it's this giant swing that they pull you back on a pulley system, like, I mean, like giant, like hundreds of feet sort of thing. And then when you get to your limit of how far up you want to go, there's a release that you pull, and it drops you, and you're supposed to swing back and forth and end up fine, And so this one at Carolina Point had 3 people on it. Liv was in the middle, and whenever they got to the top, they dropped it, and due to negligence on several different people's part, Liv wasn't harnessed in, and essentially she fell a couple hundred feet, and died. So, yeah, that's basically what happened. Yeah, that was a lot of exposition to get to that, but yeah.
That's okay. However, you felt like you needed to tell it was fine. So talk to me a little bit about where you are today.
Um, so back, I guess, a lot of things have changed. Um, it's been a little over 5 years now. Um, and I've gotten married since then. Um, one of um, one of the things I'm very thankful for is that Liv got to meet who was then my boyfriend um, a couple of times before she died. So I've gotten married. Um, I have switched careers from film, which is what my degree's in, to EMS, because why don't I need more trauma in my life? um, I've dealt with a lot of depression and PTSD um, and anxiety. I had constant anxiety, like pretty much a panic attack every day for about a year and a half after it happened. And then it's gotten slowly better now. I've become an alcoholic, um, which I'm in recovery for now. And um, yeah, so, but right now I'm on, I think, the upswing of things, which is hard to tell, but it's at least been better the last couple months. So yeah.
So through this process, what were the main questions that you asked yourself? Or even what were the questions that you asked God? As people of faith, I think sometimes we are fearful to question God, but when we get in the most tragic times, we do. So what would you say about that? Are there questions that you asked?
Um, I definitely think there are questions that I asked. I guess one of the other things that has changed since then is that I'm no longer religious. Um, Not necessarily because of that. I think obviously it was a factor, but I had already been kind of moving that way before all that happened. But yeah, I mean, I definitely asked, like, why her? Like, that doesn't, I mean, like, why not me was another one that was really big. Um and um I think the one that's affected me most in the last, like, couple of years has been like, what could have been, I guess. um you know, for instance, like, my husband and I have tried to get pregnant this year, and every time, we thought we might be, there was always the tinge of sadness of, like, what would have Liv have thought about being an aunt. um and like, what would Liv think about what I'm doing now, which was simultaneously one of the reasons I drink and one of the reasons that I shouldn't drink. um but so I think, or even, like, what would she be doing now, because she would have been out of college by now. um so I think there's lots of questions, but I think for me that's been the biggest one. The why her. I've become kind of a cynic in that, especially with my job, because I see, like, it doesn't matter what you do in life, like, some things are gonna happen because they happen and there's not a reason for it. um so
Thank you for joining It's All in Your Head podcast. I just want to remind you to subscribe, like, share, and comment below. Thank you. I want to just explain real quickly for some of our viewers, EMS, emergency medical services, uh, that you run an ambulance essentially, right, Sabrina?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm an EMT, so
Mhm.
we see everything from nosebleeds to, gunshot wounds. Um, so
Why do you think you chose that career?
um I mean, practically I've always been interested in medicine, and that was always kind of my fallback, and EMS is a short schooling process to get into. Um, but I mean, I do enjoy helping people and feeling like I'm doing something not I mean, I guess it is meaningful, but being doing something to like directly affect other people. Um, yeah.
I was just wondering if your sister's passing away had anything to do with maybe your career choices.
Um, I think it has been a reason that I've stuck with it. And it wasn't just a passing like interest. Um, because in the last year I've tried to get more involved with the details of what happened to Liv that day, because I wasn't involved in the court hearing at all in it. Um, so I've had to go back and read a lot of the court documents in order to understand some of the things that happened. And um, one of the things being in EMS now is I always think about the responders that would have been there that day, um, and how I would have reacted to that sort of thing. And I guess like I feel so out of control of that situation that knowing that I can be moderately in control of a similar situation for someone else makes me feel better in some backwards way, I guess.
That makes sense.
And not backwards at all. And I think also what comes to mind, because you mentioned a court hearing. So if you don't mind sharing, if you can share, talk to us a little bit about what the court proceedings were.
Yeah. So um, this is all my understanding from what my parents have told me and from what I've read on my own. So also, I'm not listed as a plaintiff, so I can talk about it. Um, Basically, the first thing they had to decide was whether to try this as a criminal hearing or as a civil hearing. And as child negligence or as um, like damages, something like that. So um, my parents decided, and with their attorneys, that we weren't going to try them legally because basically there's no way we would have won. um, for a couple of reasons, but one of them being that Young Life is a multi-million-dollar company, um, and they have a lot of legal resources, and it just wouldn't have ended up well. So we decided to try them civilly. Um, so basically, there were three plaintiffs in it, or I mean, sorry, three defendants in it. Young Life, the company that built the ride, and then the company that installed the ride. Um, and basically, Young Life contested that they did everything they were supposed to do, and that it was the training company and the company who built it that were the issue. Basically, what the coroner's investigation found was that there weren't enough points of contact for that sort of ride. They were using one carabiner clamp um, per child, essentially, to fall several hundred feet. um, so that was an issue. One of the other issues is that they were supposed to do a double check system. Um, which if you've ever been to an amusement park, this is what they do, you know. Uh, a Work the workers come and they pull up on the clamps, right? And then they ask you to do the same thing and give them thumbs up or whatever, like check your own device. Um, at the time of Liv's accident, they only had one worker working when they were supposed to have two. Um, and they didn't ever do the first check of that where she pulled on the um, carabiner herself. So that's essentially the argument. So there's fault on everyone's side. And then it came to, like, you know, what are we going to ask from them in terms of reparations? Because my family was not bad off at all. And I've never cared about money personally. And there's no amount of money that would have ever done anything to bring Liv back or to make it okay or anything like that. So that to me was arbitrary. But the real argument came with, you know, um, our agreement. Like, are we going to speak out against Young Life directly, or are we going to say, you know, after this we're done, and um, we'll leave it alone, sort of thing, which essentially is what we ended up doing, or my parents ended up doing. I only recently found out that because I wasn't a plaintiff, that doesn't apply to me, um, which is good because I can do things like this now and not have to worry about being countersued and that sort of thing. Um, so yeah, basically the whole court proceedings I was very in the dark on. So I've only found this out like the last 2 years. And to be honest, I wouldn't have wanted to be a part of the court stuff at that time because I was not in a good place mentally, or, you know, I was still very much in the anger phase, and I just would have been like, you know, I don't know how y'all feel about language on your show, so I'm not gonna say it, but uh, you know, uh, I just don't think I would have been very mature about it and about some of the decisions I would have fought for, I guess.
That's interesting. And I don't want to make it the terror show, but I have a very, very similar situation. And I know Michelle remembers because my younger brother died due to medical negligence. And it was the most, I don't know, surreal type of situation that you could ever imagine. It's like having an out of body experience. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And so just hearing you talk about it, I'm like, man, I remember these feelings. And I'm a crybaby, so ignore that because that happens all the time. But it's just like, I understand what you're saying, and having to go through all of those things and like thinking about legal proceedings and being just so angry. It's like, who cares? You know, there's no amount of money that can bring that person back. And people not knowing or even understanding what you might have gone through. And I remember at one point, an attorney, because my brother's father actually sued the hospital, which, you know, he had a right to do. But the attorney called me because my brother had made me his medical power of attorney. And so I was the first contact that the hospital made when he got into distress. And when she called, I guess she thought that I had been up on the story and didn't know, but I didn't know what they were doing. I didn't even know that they were suing anyone. I had no idea. And she was like, well, let me bring you up to speed. And still not thinking, because she's thinking some years have gone by. No one understands the impact on you and losing a sibling. And she was like, well, basically, we got a good case because what happened is they just let him die, not thinking anything, not thinking that the way that she spoke could even have an effect. And I remember after getting off that phone call, like, I kind of was right back in that place. I never want to talk to these people again. I don't want to talk to anybody involved. I don't care what's going on. I don't know about the money. I don't care if they got money. It's just the whole, it's such a traumatic situation, and there's no way you can prepare for it. So it's like you spend years doing the damage control after. And that's where a lot of the PTSD comes from a situation like that. We're trying to figure out in our minds how we can prevent the next tragedy, even though that's not possible. And so that's what, in essence, PTSD is. That's what happens to the body. That's what happens to the mind. And so I appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate it. So can you talk a little bit to us about any PTSD symptoms that you've experienced? Like, talk a little bit about what that was like for you, maybe thoughts you had, even if you had any physical responses.
I definitely had physical responses. The first couple months, I was having the like sensory deprivation. Like I literally couldn't feel my fingertips at all, ever. And I started having a lot of death anxiety about myself and about other family members. Um, and and then and then it became like every because I was very, very close to my family growing up. um it it's slowly become that any um family like gathering really stresses me out. And I don't know if that's because after it happened, like they were in our house for like 3 days, so I just felt like the gathering is so tied to that memory. um but yeah, the death anxiety has been a big one. um my poor husband, like the first year or two after it happened, when we were still dating, if I knew he was driving like more than an hour, I would call him about every 15 minutes to make sure that he was still okay. And then if he didn't pick up for some reason, like he was in the gas station or something, I'd freak out, like crying hysterically, hyperventilating on my own, like calling his parents to see if they could reach him after literally only 20 minutes of not talking to him. Um, so those are definitely big ones. I s- um, stopped talking to a lot of people that I was close to and that Liv was close to because the shared memories were really hard. Um, And also, it's just kind of awkward when people know that you're grieving like that. I feel like I think it's a catch 22 because when you're in grief, you feel, or having PTSD or whatever, like you feel like you need people to acknowledge that you're going through this and that you don't want to feel alone, but at the same time, anytime you talk to someone, you're not happy with their response. Like it's either like, oh my gosh, they brought up so many memories and they wanted to talk about her, and why don't they know that I don't want to talk about her right now because it hurts? Or if they don't bring it up, it's like, why are they ignoring that this is a thing? Um, so it took several years to finally be like able to have normal conversations with people that I was close to, because I had to get over a lot of my just complete unhappiness with how any of the conversations were going to go. Yeah. And then there's a lot of the self-deprecation for me, at least, which is partially like Michelle and I have talked about, the survivor's guilt. um, and feeling like I never did enough, or blaming myself for decisions that I wouldn't have changed anyways. Like for a while I was mad at myself because I didn't go home that summer, even though the program I was in required me to stay during summer. But I'm like, if I had gone home that summer, she wouldn't have gone to camp, and then none of this would have happened. Or um if I made the youth group at our church better when I was there, she wouldn't have had to go to the other youth group, and then she never would have gone to camp. Um, that sort of thing kind of like snowballed and then morphed into this self-berating, really toxic, just hatred of myself, um, that, led to my addictions and led to self-harm and furthered my depression and all this stuff. So yeah, lots of things came out of it, I guess.
Thank you for joining us for It's All in Your Head podcast. Remember to subscribe, like, share, and please comment. Whatever mental health questions you have, we will be happy to answer them in future podcasts. So tell me, if anything, what good came out of it?
Oof. Out of the PTSD, you mean? Or out of
No, even in totality, however you want to answer it.
I think that's such a hard question because I hate like signing the word good to the situation in any um extent. But I mean, I know for one that I never would have gone to therapy ever if this hadn't happened. Um my best friend growing up, um one, I thought she was going to be like a therapist or a psychiatrist or something from the time that we met. She's in law school now, but my best friend growing up always used to say, even before I graduated high school, she's like, you need to go talk to someone. And I was so vehemently against it. Like, I was like, no, they're not going to understand. Also, I don't need to talk to anyone. I can figure this out on my own. Like, I know what's going on inside my head. Um, Not realizing that it's not normal for a 13-year-old think to themselves like I should kill myself on like a daily basis. Um, but yeah, so because of this, it I had to go talk to someone because there was no way that I could process everything on my own. Um, because like I mean, like I said, like I couldn't even fathom the worst case scenario being an actual scenario. And so and hearing it didn't change anything. So um kind of like accepting that this is how it is, and trying to understand all the feelings about it because there's so many, um has been good because I think it's grown me as a person. But I still wouldn't say that there's good in this scenario. I feel like there could have been good without the scenario too, but
Maybe a better way to put it is that finding some sort of meaning afterwards for your life.
yeah. You were saying that um finding purpose or direction, is that what?
Yeah, some sort of meaning or purpose, yeah, to come from it.
um I don't know, because also like after it happened, I thought that my purpose was going to be to, either avenge Liv's death, which was never, I don't think is ever going to happen, or, to shine a light on some of the things that are wrong with these sort of camps. Like, I thought that was my purpose, and, um, at least for me, that was a dangerous idea because it made me, like, neglect my actual self, and it made my entire personality revolve around, "This is a thing that happened to me, and this is how I feel about it, and that's my only goal in life is to talk about this and to fix this." And I think it's doing Liv's memory a really big disservice to see myself that way because she knew that I was enough at one point, when I didn't. So I think if she believed that I had a purpose for before all this happened, it means that I still have to have one that's not related to her, you know? So,
That sounds like a really good purpose right there, is just recognizing that you had one before she died and you'll have one after.
yeah.
I like that.
I do too. I'm not at a loss for words, but I guess I want to say in awe for lack of a better word. I really thank you, like just for sharing and being able to be articulate in the way that you shared. And to talk about just the different things that you've gone through personally and how at one point you made it about you and then you changed it, you know, to what can I do to honor my sister's memory is what I'm hearing that you're saying. And I think that that's great. So let me ask really quick, how are your parents?
Um, oof. So, um, my parents got divorced last year, um, which, I mean, I think it's fair to say that really this was something that was coming without Liv happening. Um, and I think they would both agree with that. But my dad stepped down from the church. Um, I don't want to say too much about what he feels now because that's not my place. But um, I know he went through a lot of anger. He was in the anger stage for a lot longer than I was, and I was in it for a very, very long time. Um, and my mom just says a lot that she slept the first 2 years after it happened, um, and just like had no energy for anything. Um, which my sister was my mom's best friend, and vice versa. Especially after I left for college, because they were, essentially there for each other, while my dad was working and that sort of thing. So, but they've definitely both started out. I don't like the term moving on either, but I think learning to adapt. They're both dating people now and trying to figure out what makes them happy right now. So I think they're doing as good as they can be, is the way we like to say it.
I love the word that you use, adapt.
Mhm. Yeah, because you don't really ever get over the death of someone. My own mother died tragically in a car accident really suddenly, and you don't really ever get over it, but something adapts and changes around the loss of that person, and then a new life is formed, and then it moves on from there.
Mhm.
You did a really good job today of talking about this. I know this was hard for you.
Thank you. Ugh.
Is there anything you feel like you didn't say that you would have wanted to say today?
No. I mean, I'm sure things are gonna come to me later that I'm like, oh, I didn't, you know, say this or go over this feeling. But um, I don't know. I feel I tried really hard not to talk about Liv so much because I've found that every single time I try to talk about her, I never capture her essence. And I was telling you that that was one of my apprehensions about doing this because I, you know, Liv was the absolute best person. Like everyone at the funeral talked about, she was so funny and she was so smart and um she loved Disney, and for some reason that's the one thing that everyone decided to latch onto. Um but like she was so much more than that. And um yeah, like I guess the best way to say is that she made me feel so not alone um when she was here. So I think that was one of the big things that I had to adjust to, as we're saying, was that the person that made me feel least lonely in the universe isn't here anymore for as physically. So dealing with a lot of the loneliness left from that was a big thing that I'm still working on. So
What we both know is the expert on this was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her books. One was on grief and grieving, and the other one was on death and dying. So we know about those stages of grief, right?
Mhm.
So something that I'll talk about those stages of grief. And what we both know is that those stages aren't linear, piece by piece, step at a time. But what they are is we start out in kind of a denial. Our brain protects itself that way by feeling like that person we love is just going to walk right back in the door. We're just sure of it. They're just going to show up. And then once our brain gets through that denial stage, and sometimes it takes a few months, some time passes, and all of a sudden one day we realize, oh my gosh, this person is just never coming back. And then we get angry.
Mhm.
And the anger shows up in various ways. And then we start thinking things like, well, what if I had just done this? Or what if I had just done that? Maybe this wouldn't have happened. If only this, if only I had said that to them before they died, if only this had happened. We call that the bargaining stage.
Mhm.
And then we get profoundly depressed. And those stages can come and go and come and go and come and go. We get angry, we start bargaining with things, we get depressed, and those come and go. And then at some point in time, we get to a stage of acceptance, and that doesn't stay even. We go back and forth into anger, into bargaining, sometimes even back into
Yeah,
denial.
but I think that when people get to the stage of acceptance, they're just accepting the fact that that person probably will never come back or will never come back. But it doesn't mean that it's gotten easier. Thank you for joining us today for episode 13 of It's All in Your Head podcast. And remember,
Mental health matters.
and if you don't deal with your stuff, it's going to deal with you. Bye-bye.
Bye.